All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. We're in Genesis chapter 8. Genesis chapter 8. Before we get started, I don't know if I'd call it a clarification because I'm not clear on it, so I don't know how to clarify it. I guess it was last week we were talking about the animals that went onto the ark, clean and unclean. Unclean animals, God told Noah, take them by twos, two of every kind is how it's described. And then you get to the clean animals, and he says, take them by sevens. And so there was a discussion, because I didn't have it written down, I was just riffing, which that's always dangerous, but I was just rolling, and no one stopped me. And I said, so I guess that probably means 3 male, 3 female, and 1, bonus, which would be like probably another female. And then so a bunch of other people came up and said, I thought it was like 7 pairs. You have 1 pair of the unclean and 7 pairs of the clean animals.
It says 2 pairs.
What did I say?
It says 2 pairs.
Does it say 2 pair?
It did in mine.
Mine does too.
Yours says 2 pair?
Well, no, mine does not say 2 pairs. Mine says 7 pairs.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
Well, what verse is it?
It's Genesis 7. Oh, yeah. For the clean part, it's Genesis 7. I think it's like verse 2. Yeah, verse 2. Of every clean beast, you'll take the by sevens. That's the old King James. What does everybody else have?
7 pairs.
It says 7 pairs? What translation is that?
7.
ESV? I like the ESV, so I'm going to trust that.
ESV says 7 pairs. And then New King James says 7 each of every.
Okay, let's go with 7 pairs. Let's all of us just collectively say it's 7 pairs. Let's go with that. But then, I want to know, Molly, since you have the ESV right there, back in chapter 6, near the end of it, verse 19, mine says, of every living thing of flesh, 2 of every sort. What do you have?
2 of every sort.
Okay.
2 of every kind.
Okay. I wonder, and this is me just riffing, no one stop me. I wonder if what that means is the 2 of every sort means a pair. It means pair, 2 pair. And then how many pairs depends on clean or unclean. That could be a totally different thing. Anyway, hope that clarifies things. Genesis chapter 8. And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth and the waters assuaged. This is where we left off last week. We had a little thing. We ended the class talking about wind. And you can also translate the same word, ruach, in the Hebrew as spirit. And if you do it that way, translate it that way, then you've got a beautiful little parallel to the opening of the Bible, to the first creation in a sense, where God's Spirit moves over the waters. Well, what do you have here? You have God's Spirit moving over a world of water. Same visual, same idea. You have the making of the world, now you have the remaking of the world. So it's very poetic and symmetrical that way. Or it's just a wind, if you want to strip all that away. Verse 2. And the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. So what you have here are the 2 sources of the flood. Well, most people just think of the flood, they think of just rain coming down, but it was so much more than that. The first thing mentioned in verse 2 is the fountains of the deep, which God caused to explode and sent water and potentially ash up into the atmosphere. That's stopped. That's done. Then rain falls from the canopy above. That is now stopped. And so finally, the stormy, turbulent environment in which the ark was for a long time just abiding, now a relative calmness has taken over. But this is not the end. Noah will be in the ark for a while. So verse 3. And the waters returned from off the earth continually, and after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. So the water came from the fountains of the deep, rising up. Some came down, but a lot of water came up from the fountains of the deep. And now, what Moses writes is they return, basically he says they return to their source. So they came from below, they go back into below. What does that mean? What does that look like? How does that work? Well, I don't have the specifics, and I don't have them because Moses doesn't write them. But I'll tell you this, there are trenches in the oceans of the earth that are miles deep. And this does not have to be that tall, that much in terms of height to cover the earth at this time. So it's not a remarkable, crazy thing to think that there was some kind of an opening, some fissure that just drains water into it to reduce and mountains and so forth and land reappear. Something like that. Something, I'm going to say again, like that. I don't have the exact scientific thing that happened. We don't have Genesis the documentary. Wouldn't that be wonderful? We have Genesis the very broad historical record for the first 11 chapters. I do want to read something though. This is from Psalm 104, verses 6 through 9. Psalm 104, starting in verse 6, the psalmist says, speaking to God. You cover with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains, and at your rebuke they fled. At the voice of your thunder they hastened away. They go up by the mountains, they go down by the valleys, unto the place where you have founded for them. You set a bound that they may not pass over, that they turn not again to cover the earth. That's obviously a poetic reimagining of the flood account and God's promise, which we'll get to later in this text about not to do it again. But you have this little literary descriptions here. The water that you have caused to go away, it goes up by the mountains, it goes down by the valleys to the place that you have founded for them. So whenever someone says, where did the water go? The answer that your Bible gives, and your Bible is the psalmist's commentary. The psalmist says, the water went where God wanted it to go. The water went where God designed for it to go, where God founded it to go. That's where it went. Verse 4. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. Now, I guess Google Earth probably has it. You can Google Earth and you can find the Mount Ararat. But this text does not say Mount Ararat. There probably was not a mountain singled out as Mount Ararat, even in Moses' day. But there was the mountain regions. There was Greater Ararat and Lesser Ararat, the mountain range. You'll have people who will read this and they'll try to triangulate and they'll say Noah's Ark can be found somewhere closer to Armenia as opposed to modern-day Turkey, Eastern Turkey. But look, we're never going to find the thing. It is fruitless. It is pointless. It is a waste of time to try to figure out exactly where the ark is. But I have done so, and I will draw it. No, I'm just kidding. I have not done that. It's a waste of time. As I said last week, go to northern Kentucky. You'll get the closest approximation of it there. In this verse, though, something else that's interesting. And this Moses will do this a few times in this whole flood account, where he gives you calendar dates, calendar approximations. Like here in verse 4, he says the ark rests in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month. So there's one of two ways to read that. Either you have, this is Moses using whatever calendar Noah would have gone by, whatever Noah reckoned as the 7th month and the 17th day of that month. Days you reckon by the moving of the sun, months by the movement of the moon. We don't do that anymore, but that was your classical lunar calendar. So that's just Noah's reckoning of what Noah reckoned as the 7th month on the 17th day of that month. Or, other alternative, this is Moses. Since he is the author, he is writing it to the Israelite people initially, and they have already been given their own calendar. Their calendar begins with Passover, and in the civil sense it begins with Yom Kippur. But they have their own set calendar, so they know what their first month of the year is, and their 7th day of the month is. Incidentally, Yom Kippur is their 7th month. It's the 10th day of their 7th month. On the 15th day of the 7th month, for the Hebrew calendar, that is the beginning of the Feast of Tabernacles. So if you're trying to find, is there some spiritual or calendar significance to the resting of the ark on day 17 of month 7, if this is the Hebrew calendar, there is no specific date where it just lands on something. It's in the middle of the Feast of Tabernacles, when all the Israelites would go inside booths and they would be reminded of God leading through the wilderness. But there's no real deep significance there. So if you put a gun to my head and made me answer, I would say probably this is just Noah's calendar, and Moses is just regarding it, how Noah was regarding it. But if you say it's Israel's calendar and he's giving his own people a frame of reference, then so be it. It doesn't really mean anything. Verse 5. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month, so 3 months later. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. So the ark has come to rest on a mountain, but the water, as we'll see throughout the rest of this chapter, is not entirely gone. Moses said in verse 3 of this chapter they would recede gradually. And he reiterates that here. The waters continue receding. For 3 months they are receding, at least up to this point, 3 months. And Moses and the ark's inhabitants had to stay in the vessel. They had to stay in the giant box with all of the animals, no longer doing anything. I mean, I guess they're still feeding the animals and everything, but they're not like, they can tell it's calm outside. The storm has stopped. The rain has stopped coming up. The rain has stopped coming down. The boat is just there. They've dropped the anchor stones on the mountains wherever they are in Ararat, and they're just sitting there. And they have to stay just sitting there while the waters slowly recede. You can imagine how frustrating, how anxious they probably were. Not just in the impatient, let's just get this over with sense, but in the sense of, I want to see what is out there. This new world that God has prepared for us, we 8 people, and these animals that we've saved. So they're just sitting and they're just waiting, and it continues. Verse 6, it came to pass at the end of 40 more days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. That's chapter 6:16, if you remember. It's called window in my Bible. It's not like a window. It's just a raised part, a cubit tall. So Noah was able to, as we'll see, stick his arm out and let go of a bird. So not much really to get a sense of what the world is like out there. Just a practical window, for lack of a better. Verse 7, canopy, if you will. Verse 7, and he sent forth a raven, which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. So, he's going to let go a dove in a little bit. First, though, he sends a raven. Why a raven? Ravens are scavenger animals. Ravens will eat dead things, like a vulture or something would do. So you let go of a raven. If the waters had receded, here are your mountains, and so forth. And let's say the ark is, well, it's going to look like the Grinch up there, but let's say it's just teeter-tottering up there. It probably wasn't like that. Mountains, they're big, giant things. So anyway, the ark's up there. And here's another mountain. So here's I don't have any other colors. So here's your water, So he sends forth the raven. There it is. He sends forth the raven, and if the water had gone down enough to where there are, these are fish. Dead fish that were dead in the water go up with the water, and then as the waters recede, they're going to land on the mountains. They're going to be on ground, just dead, laying there. The raven can go and can eat them if there is food there to eat. Instead, if there is no food, it's going to come back to the place where it knows food is. So that's the mindset. That's the idea. The raven goes and comes back because there's nothing to find so far. Verse 8. Then Noah sends forth a dove. Same illustration works. Sends forth a dove to see if the waters had abated from off the face of the ground. Same purpose, same idea. Sends a dove. Dove is different. Dove is not a scavenger animal. Dove's not going to eat dead creatures. A dove will eat vegetation, among other things. It eats nuts and things too, maybe worms, but vegetation mostly. So this is not so much looking for animals as it is looking for, are there trees? So it's like a palm tree. Let's pretend. It's looking for, is there fruit? Is there growth? Is there new life for this dove to start consuming? If it goes and it comes back, it has found no new life. If it goes and we don't see it again, it's found itself a nice little place to land, and it's not coming back. So he sends forth the dove to see if the waters were down that much. Verse 9. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, so she returned unto him into the ark. For the waters were on the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand and took her, the dove, and put her with him back into the ark. That. Verse 10. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and then he waited 7 days, and then sends forth the dove again. Once again, I could just imagine how impatient, that's probably too harsh a word, but just how anxious he was during this whole week, just sitting and waiting to give the water more time to see finally will something happen. So 1 week later, verse 11, he sends out the dove, and the dove comes back to him in the evening. But lo, this time it did come back, but with an olive leaf plucked off in its mouth, or her mouth. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from the earth. So you might read this whole thing, and if you're a skeptic, and if you're a critic of the Bible, and if you're someone who's looking to undermine the Bible's authenticity and legitimacy and just paint it as a bunch of fairy tales that a bunch of ignorant people in caves dreamed up somewhere someday, you might read this and think, how does this make any sense? Because the idea is, he sends forth, this is now a dove, he sends forth the dove, it finds fruit, or an olive branch, an olive leaf, implying it's got fruit, and it comes back, revealing the evidence thereof. How did that tree, the skeptic will say, survive in order to bear fruit just so shortly after the waters have receded? How is that thing bearing fruit after such a cataclysmic thing that just took place? These sort of questions. But who said this tree just withstood the flood? Who said that God, the same God who in the beginning just said trees, and there they were, didn't, while he was remaking the world under these waters, provide for Noah and his family trees and fruit and vegetation, so that the animals that are going to leave the ark can have something to feast on. I would remind you that when God tells Noah, here is what you're going to preserve to leave the ark with, to repopulate the earth, he tells him to take yourself and your family and to take animals. He doesn't tell him to take a bunch of potted plants to reseed the earth. God has prepared that. Moses, the writer, didn't overlook that, and here I am, some loser 5,000 years later, figured it out, and I've unraveled the whole Bible. No. Moses knew what he was writing because the Holy Spirit was guiding him. He didn't just forget that part and have this big giant plot hole in the story. God didn't tell him to bring seeds and plants and things to replant, because God was going to take care of that. God had worked that out. The same God who in the beginning made all things is going to himself remake all things, except for whatever he put in the boat with Noah. And that's purely by his own discretion to do it that way. So that's that. Verse 12. Noah then, having received the dove and knows now signs of life, he waits another 7 days and sends forth the dove, and this time it doesn't come back. So it found something, but not enough where it could nest, permanently. But now it's gone. It's living over here in this palm tree, and it's not coming back. Verse 13. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, in the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. So up to this point, he's just sticking his arm out the window, basically, from our vernacular. But now he gets to actually peer out and see what this world looks like. He removes the covering, he looks, and he sees the ground is dry, not arid, not, a barren wasteland, but rather trees flourishing, vegetation sprouting, new flowers blossoming, a world ready to be populated, a newly remade, refreshed, reinvigorated, renewed earth, ready for God's saved people to enjoy. The poetry of Genesis, without even realizing it, because God hasn't rhymed it yet. But there it is, right there in Genesis 8. As for your calendar, the 601st year, the first month of the first day, does that mean this is Noah's birthday? Or does that mean it's just the first month, the first day of the 600th year in general? It doesn't matter, but I don't know why the calendar stuff is stuck in my head, but there it is. It's really hot in here right now. I feel myself getting sweaty. Verse 14. And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dried. That's just Moses' inspired commentary. Verse 15. And God spoke to Noah. If you're going back in your Bible to find when was the last time God talked to Noah, at least that's what's recorded for us, the last thing that God says to Noah in the Bible is, get on the boat. It's time to get on the boat. And then everything happens. And whether or not God spoke to him since then, Moses doesn't write. It is entirely plausible or possible that he did. But God, I don't want to say obeys. God's nature leads him to follow what's called the law of parsimony, which is God does not waste energy. God does not do anything unnecessarily, because God is perfect. He never gets caught flat-footed. He has to scramble and he has to overcompensate. No, God always does it exactly right, bullseye every time. Always hits it exactly how he wants to hit it. Says exactly how much he needs to say and no more. So it's entirely possible, since God would really have nothing to say to Noah, that God did not speak to Noah at all during the entirety of the flood event. That the last thing Noah heard from God, who speaks to the patriarchs, God tells this patriarch, it's time to get on board the ark, and then I'm going to shut the door and the rain's going to start. And that's it. He doesn't hear from him again for the whole duration of this. A duration which was violent and cataclysmic, with thunders and lightnings and water coming up and water coming down and all of that. And it's entirely possible that God said nothing during all of this. But God is not like people. People, we get awkward in silence. I had lunch. Frank's teaching his own class right now. I said to Frank a couple months ago, I said, let's go to lunch. Is John here? John Harrington is not here. I go to lunch with John Harrington once a month. We just sit and we shoot the breeze and we just talk. Usually I'm talking bad about you guys, and we talk about sports and stuff like that. So we just sit, we shoot the breeze, we talk, we have a great old time. So I said to Frank, let's go to lunch. Oh man, it was just crickets for the first 5 minutes, because he doesn't hear well, so he's not one for talking. I'm a naturally kind of introverted person. I'm not one for talking. John will just talk and talk and talk. So I'm just receiving. I'm not much giving, right? It was quiet for a long time sitting with Frank, and the awkwardness was felt. People don't like awkward silences, but God is not people. God is fine with silence. That doesn't mean he's not paying attention, that he's not listening, or that he doesn't care, anything like that. It's just God is fine not saying anything. Malachi speaks and speaks and speaks, and the last thing he says by prophecy is the sunrise is coming, and then it's just silence until John the Baptist comes onto the scene, the next prophet. That doesn't mean God wasn't active and God wasn't doing, because he was. But in terms of speaking through prophecy, John the Baptist comes onto the scene, and that's 350 years of silence finally broken when he says, here comes the Messiah. So it's entirely possible, is my point, that God said nothing through all of this. But Noah still knew God was with him, because every moment he was not dying in the flood, he had proof that God was with him. But finally here God speaks. And he says, verse 16, go forth out of the ark, you and your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives with you. And so they do so. Can you imagine how fresh the air must have smelled? Right? Not just from the standpoint of I have been stuck inside this wooden box with a bunch of animals, and regardless of how efficiently they regulated, waste removal and food dispensing and things like that, and how well they kept their floor separate from where the elephants were or whatever, it's still a stuffy, boxed-in thing. And then you step out, and it is the freshest the world has ever smelled since Adam and Eve first drew in breath. And to smell that fresh air. And they're in the mountains, that fresh mountain air. Can you imagine what that must have been like? Verse 17. God continues. Bring forth with you every living thing that is with you, of all flesh, both fowl and cattle, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. God will say this multiple times for the next couple of chapters. Be fruitful and multiply. The world is new. Start over. Verse 18. And Noah went forth, and his sons and his wives, and his sons' wives with them. They go out, they leave the ark. You'll see in a little bit, they build an altar and they praise the Lord for their survival and for their safety and for God's providence. But the ark is done. They don't build a shrine to the ark. They don't build a monastery at the foot of the mountain where the ark was. When they pray, they don't pray in the direction of the ark. It was just a big wooden box that kept them alive. And they were thankful for it. But they were only thankful for it through the prism of being grateful that God provided it for them, that God provided for their salvation. They did not thank God for the ark so much as they thanked God for His salvation. Just was seen in the picture of the ark. Salvation belongs to God. Credit always goes to Him, never to the tool, whatever it may be that He uses to bring about that salvation. You'll not find anyone, I would hope, ever thank God for baptism, for example. But you credit the blood of Jesus, and you thank God for the blood of Jesus, which is found in the washing waters of baptism. So salvation belongs to God. So they exit. Verse 19. Every beast and every creeping thing and every fowl, whatever creeps upon the earth after their kinds, they all went forth out of the ark. The same God who providentially led those animals, because Noah wasn't like shepherding, smacking a staff to get them on there. The same God who providentially, for lack of a better phrase, hijacked the minds of these instinct-driven animals and guided them to the ark, now is guiding them off the ark and out of the ark. God uses the nature instinct that He put in them, that He, the Creator, implanted in them to get them off the ark. Humans are also beings with instinct. Animals are creatures of instinct, but animals have no free will. Humans are beings with instinct. I won't call ourselves creatures, but beings with instinct. We have certain innate within us things that we are compelled to do, but also we have free will. And so with our free will, we can resist that instinct. We can rewrite, our mindset and our desires to where we ignore our instinct and we repress and suppress our instinct until we don't even appreciate that the instinct is there, and our minds and our lives get all messed up and we don't realize why. It's because we are trying to fight instinct. I think, among other things, we have an instinct within us to desire and to seek and to find God, to be these physical beings seeking a spiritual being and finding that fulfillment and that completion. Because we look at ourselves and we're all physical, and there's not like a hole that has an obvious thing that needs to be filled in our physical body. But there is something we just feel within us that is lacking. And so we try to fill it with possessions. We try to fill it with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and all the things you find in the world. And it's only those people who let go, who find what God has said, and we find through Him this sense of fulfillment. As Paul says, the peace that passes understanding. And it fills you. And I'm pointing at like my inner chest here, but it's not here. It's within me spiritually. And then we allow our instinct to find its fulfillment. We seek God, and we find the answer that we're looking for. So that's the difference between us and an animal. Verse 20. And Noah built an altar unto the Lord, and took every clean beast and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. When it says every clean beast and every clean fowl, I don't want you to take from that He's like here 7 or 14, whatever we settle on, lambs, and He kills all of them, because then there are no more lambs. No, He takes of each kind. unclean animal that he has. And he offers them on an altar. Where do you get the altar? Stones. They're just rocks and fire. And he makes an altar. They're not big, grandiose, bronze-covered things like you'll see later in human history. It's just rocks piled up with fire. Lay them on there, burn them up. And so he does. Verse 21. And God, here's a phrase you'll get all the time in Leviticus and in Exodus. When you offer a sacrifice to God, he smells the sweet savor of it. And the Lord said in his heart, quote, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Let's interpret that to mean from the time they're old enough to do, they start doing bad. Neither will I again smite any more every living thing as I have done. Now that raises a question to me. God is a very cause and effect sort of being. You get that in Ezekiel 18, I think verse 30. The soul that sins, it shall die. That might be 18:20. It's one of the two. Ezekiel 18. The soul that sins, it shall die, and the righteous soul shall live. All right. If you do this, you get that. If you do this, you get that. Cause and effect. So you've got the situation here. The world has become evil. That's how Genesis 6 opens. The world is so abundantly evil that God says, I'm going to flood the world to destroy all the evil. God finds grace through Noah, and so through Noah and his obedient family, they're preserved. But everybody else, God says, you did, so you get. Here, God says, man is going to continue doing evil. I mean, that is basically what he says. It's not the imagination of man's heart used to be evil, but I'm glad that time's over with. No, God knows Noah himself is going to get stone drunk in just a little bit. We're not going to get it probably this week, but it's going to happen. These things will progress and continue, and yet still God says, but I'm not going to destroy the world again with the flood. But I would wonder why. I mean, I would ask God, are you justified in destroying the world the first time? And of course he is. So then why wouldn't you be justified to do it the second time? Because what's going on here with the flood is about more than just cause and effect. It's about more than just sin is bad, so I will destroy sin. Because what you read at the beginning of Genesis 6, the point of the beginning of it is not just man is really bad, so God's going to kill him. It's look, despite how bad all of humanity is, someone is good. Noah is doing right. And so because of that, because of this faithfully obedient person, I will save him in spite of everybody else being wicked. And I will give him a place of shelter and safety where I will house him, house my saved people. While judgment destroys everything else, I will preserve and spare you. The flood is not just a picture of judgment, it's a picture of grace. Granted, the way Moses writes it, he almost makes it exclusively about the judgment side of it. But when you get to 1 Peter 3, Peter specifically invokes the mercy and the love and the grace of God by showing how the flood saved 8 souls. The like figure went through baptism now saves us. 1 Peter 3:21. So you have this being who says, I'm going to destroy the world with the flood. Later, you can have Sodom and Gomorrah. Why doesn't he flood Sodom and Gomorrah? He does something else, but why not a flood? You have Adam and Eve in the garden. They sinned. Why not flood the garden? Why is this just a one-time only thing? Because this is designed to be a one-time only picture that God paints to show I don't just destroy, I also save. I don't just take away sin, I also preserve the faithful, preserve the obedient, preserve those who are saved. And God holds both hands within himself, within his nature. The goodness and severity of God, as Paul would later describe it. So the flood's a picture of judgment and salvation in equal measure. So when God says, I'm not going to do that anymore, it's because I've already painted this picture. I don't need to repaint it. I'll handle sin more permanently later through the cross. 8:22. God says, while the earth remains, there's a caveat statement, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Now people will forget the beginning of that verse, and when you get to like Peter's time, they'll say, well, all things continue as they were from the beginning, all things are always going to be the same. That there is no second coming of Christ to worry about, there is no promise of his coming. Where is the promise of his coming? Everything has always been, everything shall always be. And Peter says, the world has not always been the same. It was overthrown by water, and it will be overthrown by fire. That's 2 Peter 3. So you have this while the earth remains promise. While the earth is what it is and doing what it's doing and spinning as it's spinning, you'll have your seasons, you'll have your growth and your death and your renewal every spring and so forth. So while the earth is doing its thing, it will be here, ready for the humans who occupy it to inhabit and enjoy it. But it will not always remain, is the promise. No chapter breaks. Keep going. 9:1. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. That's the second time now. He'll say it again and again throughout this chapter. It's a big world. Don't just stay in one place. That's foreshadowing to chapter 11. It's a big world. Spread out. Do not just sit there and try to do something dumb. So be fruitful and multiply. Verse 2. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moves upon the earth, upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. God says, fear and dread is given to every animal toward every person. Now, if my pasty white self starts traipsing through the jungle, a lion is not going to look at me and be like, oh, better not mess with that guy. No, the lion's going to pounce, and that's going to be curtains for me. So what does God mean? It sounds like it should be the opposite, but no. A pride of lions are never going to get together to discuss how to best control the human population so they can build a strip mall in the Sahara. People do that. Lions do not do that. So don't be dumb and get in the path of a lion to, do whatever you did that one time in that one story you told me. Don't just get in the path of a lion. But lions are not going to be a threat to humanity. Okay, whereas humanity can be a threat. Look at all the animals that we've driven into extinction because we wanted to build a strip mall, etc. So that's how it works. An animal is going to have a limitation. It can only go so far. Human beings have far more capacity to think and to do and to act. And we will therefore exercise that to have dominion, including to hunt. Verse 3. Every moving thing that lives shall be meat for you. Now that's a generalized statement. There are going to be some things that God's going to tell his people they can't eat. In fact, in the very next verse, he's going to start limiting what and how they eat. But generally speaking, you are the dominant species. You are the dominant people. You're not just another animal. You are superior to the animals. You're made a little lower than the angels, but you're above the animals. And so you will hunt them. Verse 3. Every moving thing that lives will be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. So you can take this, and you can take from this the idea that pre-flood man was strictly vegetarian. It's entirely possible. Moses doesn't elaborate, but there's no debate. Man became omnivorous post-flood, that God was told humanity to eat animals and eat plants in equal measure. You might have a conscientious reason not to want to eat an animal, and that's fine. That's for you not to indulge in, but as a general statement, God allows and gives permission for a man to do so. Verse 4. But, he has the caveat, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. This is long before Leviticus, where God is even more explicit. The life of the flesh is in the blood, and it's been given to you for atonement, and so you're not to eat it, you're not to consume it. It is sacred. It is the singular sacred element of the whole Levitical system. It is just for priests to handle and to use, and even them under very specific circumstances and ordinances. The rest of you stay away from it lest you become unclean. All that comes in Leviticus. Well, we are nowhere near Leviticus. But you see it in the mind of God already. Because the statement in Leviticus, the life of the flesh is in the blood, and that justifies the law that he gives to Israel. That is still true even here, long before Israel's time. Life is still in the blood, and blood is the producer of life, etc. That whole picture that God's painting there is present here, so the same prohibition applies. Well, I want you to see, let's see. I could have sworn there was a thing. Oh, yeah, okay, so yeah, sorry. Verse 4 again. Let me read it again. But the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. I want you to think of this not so much as just a prohibition on blood itself, because I think that's an element of it, but it's also in this context of you're not animals. You can hunt and you can eat animals, but there's a way that you do that where you're not savages, where you're not animalistic yourself. When a lion hunts a gazelle or whatever, the lion pounces, it chases down, it jumps on it, and it just starts tearing into its flesh right there, and it just starts eating it raw. A lion is not going to create a barbecue spit and cook its food, but you can. Do not be an animal. Do not be a savage when you hunt and you eat and you kill. Separate flesh from blood and eat the flesh, I think is the bigger picture that God's painting there. So it's about be humane, be human, not animal-like. Verse 5. And surely the blood of your lives will I, surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. At the hand of every man, at the hand of every man's brother, will I require the life of a man. In other words, complicated way of phrasing, if an animal kills a man, the animal will die. The animal is put to death. So there's a clear understanding in the mind of God that man is not just another animal. That man is a superior race. When an animal kills an animal, that's just, they're working that out between them. Let them work that out. When an animal kills a man, you find that animal, you put it down, and you kill it. Like they strung up that elephant in Alabama back in the 30s or whatever. Remember that story?
Matthew,
Yes. I'm glad he said that after I said that, so you can just wonder what I'm talking about. Yes, please.
the clean and the unclean animals that got on the ark were a long time before Leviticus too.
Oh yeah, that's also true. Yeah, I think we made that point a couple weeks ago. Yeah, that there was something in the mind of God. He's always had an understanding of this is an animal I would consider sacrificial and non-sacrificial, something like that. That when you get to Exodus or Leviticus and Exodus, the distinctions become far more nuanced. He's much more specific, whereas there it seems much more general. There was just two broad categories, and in Leviticus he specifies this is a clean one, this is an unclean one, this is a clean one, this is unclean. You don't really get that in Genesis, but yeah, the principle is there from the beginning. You're right. Verse 6. So, if an animal kills a man, kill the animal. If a man kills a man, verse 6, then by that man's blood he shall have his blood shed. For in the image of God he made man. You don't get that justification for killing an animal, because animals are not made in the image of God. But when an animal kills a man, hey, that's a man made in God's image. Kill the animal. When a man kills a man, that's a man made in God's image. Kill the man. Put him to death. Capital punishment. Again, this is before Leviticus. This is before the law. And yet still there it is. And yet, you go back to Cain kills Abel. Cain is not sentenced to die. Not that God's hand. God didn't strike him dead, though he does that throughout history later on. He doesn't order Adam and Eve or someone on behalf to kill Cain for murdering his brother. Cain is just sent off. Lamech, Cain's descendant, will kill a man and then brag about it. And by all reckoning, we can understand, we don't have any record, he's not put to death. So there is something that now changes. Maybe it's the fact there's only 8 people, period, in the whole world. But whatever it is, God says, now if you kill somebody, that person's human life needs to be avenged. So it's put down. Verse 9. And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you. God has already established a covenant with them. Genesis 8:21. And he is reiterating that. He's going to elaborate on that by way of the rainbow. We'll get to it in just a second. But he's already given the covenant where he said, I'm not going to flood the earth again. That's the conditions of the covenant. That's the terms. You are not going to have to worry about that anymore. It's actually one of these strange covenants. Usually when God gives a covenant with people, there is some give and take. There is something you do and there's something God does. So Israel, here's the covenant with you. You are circumcising your kids on the 8th day. You are keeping the law of Moses. You are doing all these things. And then you'll be safe in the control of the covenant. But here, there's no man's part. It's just God saying, here's my promise to you. That, for lack of a better word, the word is covenant. I'm not going to destroy the earth with a flood anymore. Verse 10. And with every living creature that is with you, fowl, cattle, every beast of the earth that is with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth, the covenant is with all of them too. I'm not going to destroy all of the animals with the flood either. The flood is done. The picture has been painted. Verse 11. And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. Neither shall there be any more a flood to destroy the earth. Will there be more floods? There will be many more floods. But there will never be another flood like this, where the tops of every mountain is covered and where everything that is living is no longer living, save whatever God personally selects to save. That's done. That's not going to happen. God will have other ways that he will bring out devastation upon regions and specific locales. And it's bizarre to me, I guess it's not bizarre, that you have so many people who try to insist that the flood account was a regional thing, that the flood wasn't a real thing, the flood wasn't a global thing. But everything your Bible says about it makes it a global thing. Because if it's just a regional thing, then why is God promising not to destroy the world? Those two things are incongruent. If you're just destroying the region, then get out of the region. Why build the boat? Just move. So nothing about the flood is anything but global. It is a whole humongous supernatural event. But God will do smaller supernatural events to destroy smaller locales. Sodom and Gomorrah, supernatural, fire, brimstone. Egypt will get plagues. Assyria's army wiped out by a single angel. But God will also exercise his judgment with natural means. Babylon will take Judah. Natural, just an army overcoming a nation. Persia will take over Babylon, just an army overcoming a nation. And on it goes. God is in control. Daniel 4. Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking about how you said, like in the beginning, they didn't have the law not to kill, or like death penalty.
Yeah. At least it's not stated, but go ahead.
At first, Adam and Eve just were told not to eat the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
That's right.
And then this is more instruction. Then the Levitical priesthood is like further instruction, like specific. And then we get to like modern day, like our covenant with God. And I was just thinking, like, if you sin in your heart, it's like not just
that's
physical.
a great point.
So I was thinking about how God, from creation until now, how it became like simple physical, then like more complex physical, and then it progressed to like spiritual instruction from God.
That's a wonderful point. I'm going to write that down, and next time I teach this, I'm going to say that as though it was mine. Spiritual killing. Oh, that is such a good point, Abby. I had never put that together that way. Do you hear what she said over there? You've got this. You got no prohibition on killing, and then you've got a prohibition on killing, and then by the time you get to like the Levitical law, it has all these specifics and particulars. But then you get to Jesus, and he says, forget even putting a knife in the guy's heart. If you just hate him, if you kill him in your heart, that's sin. That's bad.
And then I was thinking about how, if we're talking about cause and effect and God liking order, it's like he is, like the closer we get to like reaching heaven as far as like the time period, it's like how more specific he is of us being like him, like his mind, and like you said, spiritual instruction. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. And that goes back to the same point. I mean, honestly, really what Jesus is saying when he talks about that, he's basically saying how his own people drop the ball. Like the Israelites, God never was okay with Israelites hating each other. It's just, it wasn't written in the law that way. And so they thought, well, if God didn't write it specifically in the law, I can't hate my neighbor, then I can't hate my neighbor. And then along comes Jesus and says, why are you hating people? God is love. You're not supposed to hate people. So, yeah, it is something new and additional, but it's also a reflection of how they had just become so rigid that they were strictly just checking boxes, legally speaking, and not living a godly life. But yes, that's an excellent point. All right, verse 12. And God said, this is the token which I will make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. So, to go back to the previous verse, a few verses ago, for as long as the world remains, all this will be. Now here God says, here is your promise that as long as the world remains, here all this will be. Verse 13, I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And so what you've got here, once again, is an opportunity for a skeptic or a critic of the Bible or a mocker of Scripture to say, look how ridiculous, look how anti-scientific this is. This is saying that God creates the rainbow, and that when God just makes a rainbow, and then when you see the rainbow, that making the rainbow is the promise that there will be no flood. But that's not what is happening here. Rainbows are a natural phenomenon. Rainbows just happen. Water molecules refract and break the light spectrum, and you see as the light hits it, the water breaks and you see the colors of the rainbow. That just happens naturally. But I would remind you, it had never rained before. So there was never an opportunity for a rainbow to be seen in its splendor in the sky. All God is doing here is he's saying to Noah, as Noah is admiring everything, and God's like, hey, you see that? And Noah's like, oh man, colors in the sky. And God says, and every time you see one, that's a reminder. Because this is now your first time to see one. It's going to stick in your mind. And every time you see one from here on out, this is your memorial to remember that I have promised this which beautifully came as a result of this flood. I'm not going to flood the world again. There will be other rain, and there will be, you get your fire hose, your garden hose, you hold it with your thumb, and it sprays, and you can see the rainbow for your kids and so forth, or your dog, whatever helps you. And then you can still see it, and you can have it. But to see the beauty of the rainbow in all its splendor, it's meant to be a memorial. God never forgets, unless he's forgetting your sin, and that's a legal thing. But God doesn't just forget, oh man, what happened to the rainbow again? But we do, and we have. Because we look at the rainbow, we say, oh, how pretty, and we move on with our lives. But God says it's a memorial. It is a given, natural occurring phenomenon to remind you of the supernatural occurring phenomenon of the flood. To remember God's judgment is on one hand. On the other hand is God's grace and God's love and God's desire to save those who will just get in the boat. Chapter 9, verse 14. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. Look, there's your promise that this was not a one-time thing. Whenever there's another rain cloud and the rain comes, the sun will come later, and then you'll see the rainbow again. You'll see the bow in the cloud. Verse 15. And I will remember my covenant. Not that he forgets, but it's a perpetual legal thing. That it's a constant for lack of a better word, reminder to God not to flood the earth. So it's for our benefit. We see and we think, okay, God has gotten his own message. He will not flood the world again anymore. So I'll remember my covenant, 15, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. Verse 16. And the boat shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. Again, sunlight and water make a rainbow. God makes the rainbow mean something. And if I trust God, it means something to me. More than just pretty pictures. It means God is there. Verse 18. And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. Seems like a random misnomer or a random interjection there. But again, remember, Moses is writing to an Israelite people who are making their way to Canaan's land. He is implanting in their minds, as they're hearing Genesis read to them on their journey for the first time, that the nations who are inhabiting the land that God has promised our father Abraham, who hasn't even come up yet, they belong to this lineage. It's just a seed he's planting that he will water and it will sprout later on in his writings. Israel, by the way, descendant of Shem, the Shemitic people, the Semitic people. That's Shem. Japheth, doesn't matter. Verse 19. These are the three sons of Noah. All of them was the whole earth, and of them was the whole earth overspread. So that's just the way of saying, from these three people, all populations of the earth came. And if that sounds bizarre to you, if that sounds crazy to you, this is page 9 in your Bible, maybe. Mine is about page 9. You go back to page 1, and you started with nothing, and there was Adam and Eve. And in 10 generations, when they left the garden, in 10 generations, you went from Adam and Eve to however huge the world was in population, and they were all destroyed but Noah and his family. God can do a lot in 10 generations. Well, we're going to see it done again, except this time with 3 couples instead of just 1. All right, we'll stop there. We'll pick it up. Verse 20 with Noah doing a bad thing. 9:20 next time.